Speaking of the Mormon practice of polygamy in Utah, author Richard Abanus wrote in his book, One Nation Under Gods, that, quote, after several years in Utah, Mormon men began realizing that their supply of young women was dwindling, end quote. 2 weeks ago, in part 3 of our coverage of this topic, we discussed how Brigham Young and others view women as property, even as cattle, which were gathered, owned, and exchanged. Well, when the women started to run in short supply here in Utah, something needed to be done to refresh the herd, so to speak. LDS missionaries were therefore instructed to bring back as many females as possible from the mission field to replenish the wanting supply. Concerns began to crop up, however, when these missionaries, who were usually a lot younger, more handsome and appealing than the brethren back here, they began to take the, quote, best women for themselves and leave the graying grandpas with the leftovers. Heber C. Kimball told departing missionaries the following, and this is found in Journal of Discourses, Volume 6, page 256. Listen, quote, "You," speaking to the missionaries, "are sent out as shepherds to gather the sheep together, and remember that they are not your sheep. They belong to him that sends you. They do not make a choice of any of those sheep. Do not make selections before they are brought home and put into the fold. The brother missionaries have been in the habit of picking out the prettiest women for themselves before they get here, and bringing the ugly ones for us." He said this. "Hereafter, you have to bring them all here before taking any of them, and let us all have a fair shake," end quote. Pretty nice stuff, eh there? That guy became a prophet of the church. Now, I've got to be honest. If I was the leader of the church that taught that men needed to take on extra wives in order to achieve exaltation, and I was talking to these missionaries, I would probably say the same thing, wouldn't you? But you have to ask yourself, what would it be in me that would proclaim such a thing? Does this sound like the love of God, the worship of God, the desire to do right? Or does this sound carnal, like the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life? Well, word got around overseas that the women that were going back to Utah, or Zion as they called it, were getting taken in and becoming plural wives. This caused both the LDS leadership and the missionaries to frankly lie to people about the practice of polygamy in order to convince them to join the church and come back to Zion. The same lying still occurs today by the missionaries, who represent a very limited gospel view to investigators, and the leadership still continue to present a very limited historical view. For example, in the 1866 version of the Doctrine and Covenants, it denied polygamy, okay? Until 1876, when the monogamy revelation, which was in the Doctrine and Covenants, was replaced with Joseph Smith's polygamy revelation. But in 1866, when the monogamy was still in the Doctrine and Covenants, Brigham Young declared, quote, "The only men who become gods, even the sons of God, are those who enter into polygamy," end quote. The same year, Brigham Young's successor, John Taylor, said, "Where did the commandment come from in relation to polygamy? It also came from God." He continued, "When I see any of our people, men or women, opposing a principle of this kind, I consider them apostates." What is interesting is that while in France, this very same John Taylor said in a debate that polygamy was not practiced. He quoted the Doctrine and Covenants as the proof text and said, and he read from the one that talked about monogamy only. Even though back in Utah, this same John Taylor, future president of the Mormon Church, while standing on French soil and denying the doctrine and practice of polygamy, had 12 wives back here, and at that point had bore him 8 children. They lie. He lied in order to get people to convert and come to this isolated land of Zion. Once they were here, they had little choice. As with the leaders, so with the sheep. Mormon missionaries routinely lied, as they do today, in order to deceive the European audiences. These lies were outright, or they were in the form of half-truths or misinformation.